It is commonly known that a career in the fire service is one that is unlike any other. From the nature of the job itself to the environment, culture, and countless hours spent together, it goes without saying that the unique bond that fire service members share is special in more ways than one. As we celebrate 50 years of the Palm Coast Fire Department, I was fortunate enough to sit down with members of the department's past and present to get a glimpse into the lives of the firefighters and the legacy of the PCFD.
I'll start with an easy question. What inspired you to join the fire service initially?
I got into it because of Pasquale Battinelli. I started in Connecticut as a volunteer. He wanted to be fire chief. I was 16, I led on the application, said I was 18, so we could vote for him. His son was a buddy of mine, and I enjoyed it.
I came from Jersey. I was a volunteer up there and just joined down here to see what it was all about, to give me something to do in this very small, when I got here it was less than 15,000 people and one firehouse, you know, and met these guys and was like, oh, that's pretty cool, you know.
I started in New Jersey as well as a junior in '79. When I came down here in '84, it was natural that I would go to the local fire department and joined up and met these guys. And it was funny because in my town we had two different fire companies and two different firehouses, where here it was one firehouse but practically three different companies. It was Engine 201, Engine 202, and Rescue 210. And each company and each had a different lieutenant, and they did things differently on each truck, and it was kind of interesting because one firehouse but three different fire companies. And it was a great learning experience, and met the, you know, and these guys, back when that department was all volunteer, I mean, the hearts were in it, and it was it. That's what we had here.
When I started, we didn't have pagers or plectrons. I was not high enough in the rank. So I used to sleep in my house with the window crack open and waiting for the siren to go off.
We had them, we just never gave you one.
I should have Spanish guy. I should have known. I should have known.
And what you talk about calls, so how many calls did they run in 1973?
Both of them. Two real fires.
Two calls in 73, and in 74 was 5, and in 76 was 8.
And how many now?
What are you up to, Chief?
13,400.
I remember when actually Joe Shore was part of it. We were part of the, and we needed to have a problem because we were going to the 3-digit, because we were running more calls than 100 a month. And I remember we had to change the whole control number. And it's like, how are we going to do this?
I remember when we thought 3 digits was enough. What do you mean we're going to run more than 999 calls?
It was all controlled on a chalkboard.
Right.
Just remember chalkboard. Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about two significant fire events, 85 and 98. Talk to me a little bit about those experiences, those of you that participated in those.
85 was ugly. I remember taking a 59 LaFrance down to Power Line Road, underneath the power lines. And we came back through and the fire had gotten to Belterre Parkway. And we were getting reports that the school had burned down. And I'm in the school talking on the phone. I'm like, dude, the school ain't burned down, but the smoke was so thick that, you know, you really couldn't tell. Yeah, that was crazy.
I was working in Jacksonville at the time. Okay, I had to come. I went out my office door, looked up in the distance, I saw the plume of smoke. And then the wife calls up, says, you won't believe what's going on. Okay, well, you know, if I got somebody to relieve me at the office, I came down here. He throws me in the back of a Ford pickup truck with a shell cab on it, and a bunch of guys from like the Hammock and Bunnell. None of them ever handled a hose, a line, nothing. Okay, takes me out in the middle of the woods somewhere. His dumpster goes, "There's your truck." It was the 02, the old France.
98 was a lot different. That we had people in town now. We had community, and trying to get them evacuated, trying to get set up, trying to do all the things that we learned from the 85 fires.
I was at a cul-de-sac in '98. It was so hot and so dry that I put a line on an empty lot, and it was just as if you poured water on a campfire. The ground there, it was just incineratingly hot.
Steam
I just steamed right up, and I've never seen those conditions.
There were trees dying because it was so dry and so hot.
In 98, it started on June 6th. We were at Drake's Raid.
Seminole Woods.
And Seminole Woods went up. And we didn't stop until July 7th.
Yes.
And then after July 7th was the cleanup. And usually when you get a disaster that comes into town, you get the wave, you get the incident, you get the response, and then you go slowly into recovery. It never went away. The fires kept coming every day, and then you get towed out on a call, and there would be multiple fires, and you would literally hold your thumb up to see which column of smoke was bigger. And you would head to that fire and say, well, I'm going to do my best on this one. This is all we got.
You used your thumb, I used my hand.
Yeah.
Well, you were motion.
So Chief here, he makes a comment, Chief Beadle and myself were running together in a quick attack at that time, 98, when the July fire happened. And he asked, then you were driver, I believe. Yeah, he asked, hey, how is the fire coming out of St. John's coming? And he says, bad. And then he says, and then I said, what do you need? And he says, I need an ocean to try to put it out.
I was working through the night, and all the resources were heading south on 95 to Volusia. And I finally stopped a few on the interstate, and the fires on both sides of the interstate. I said, where are you guys going? We're going to Volusia. I said, you got water on that truck? Yeah. You see this fire? You're going there dry. I says, we need help here.
With a lot of us out working in the field and knowing people in different parts of the state, we would go to Ocala and work and train with people that we'd never normally have that opportunity. And then when it hit the fan, and we had no one else to call because the County Emergency Operations Center couldn't handle it. They were locked behind a door, not willing to come out to give us any answers. We made our own phone calls.
Yep.
And you talk about neighbors helping neighbors. This is before, I guess, the state response plan came into full swing.
Correct.
There was no mutual aid plan put together before that, so, improvise on the fly.
Can any one of you think of a specific time that was particularly challenging that someone was able to help you through? If anyone wants to be vulnerable enough to talk about that.
Yeah, we were told we had to sit and go through a debriefing with some psychiatrists and psychologists and so forth and so on. And they were after the 98 fires, and they'd bring us together. It was probably in this room. This used to be the council room. And I kept putting it off. Finally, I got drug in there, and I got to sit down, and I'm sitting down with probably half these people. And the moderator says, hey, was anybody scared? And you got this. Because we're firefighters, we don't get scared.
I wasn't invited to that meeting.
No. And I raised my hand, I said, yeah. I said, he and I almost died twice, and the third time was with this one, where we thought it was the end. And I don't know me saying it, but then it all started coming out, and by the time of it, I probably cried for an hour after that. And as Joe said, we all hug each other, and we've been through things, and I know what the military people feel like to a point. You got to get it out. You got it. But it's pulling that pin. Who's going to pull that pin? And after that point, we were all pretty good, and we just kept going on about doing our jobs. But that whole process has evolved into there's people that are out there in the department that help. Intervention teams that can come out if you needed to talk to people.
We have shared so much of our personal life. I was 20, I got 2 kids, got married, X amount of girlfriends. That basically was shared through everybody, one point or another. I mean, we have others who have death in our family, and we all share all this to the whole
we were together all the time, especially as volunteers. We were together all the time. I was at Larry's house.
We were at your house?
Yeah, at our house.
We went for a boat ride?
Boat ride, we won't talk about.
But you know what? Some people don't make it.
Yeah.
not for everybody.
There's a lot of cops and firefighters that off themselves.
Right.
And now they've done a lot of peer support. We had those 2 infants drowned.
Yeah.
And they brought in the team.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What's something, if you can go back and talk to your younger self about some of the mental challenges that come up, what would you want to better prepare for? Is there anything specific about the job generally that you could?
Retirement.
Prioritize your big deals in life.
Yeah.
Still working.
Up until 2008, everything was a big deal in my life. And my wife got cancer. And everything went sideways. And you don't know when you walk into a doctor's office, your life's going to change 15 minutes later. And if I could have gone back and figured out what my big deals were 30 years ago, I probably would have saved myself a little bit of stress and anger going up to those days. After the diagnosis, and she later passed, you really get an idea of what's a big deal and what's not a big deal. And for the last 12 years, I've been trying to instill that on people I work with and my kids and the people around me is define your big deal. Is this as big as you're making it out, or can you get past this and get to something better?
Larry's made a ha-ha and everybody laughed about retirement, but he's on the money. You know, for 30 years, speaking for me, I did the same thing every morning. I got up at the same time. I went to the firehouse at the same time. I worked out. I did whatever. It was a schedule. It was a life for 30 years. I woke up on the 19th of September of 2018 and went, woke up at the same time, but I didn't have anything to do.
Now what?
Now what do I do?
But that's why I said retirement. You got to plan to retire. You got to plan. A lot of people, a lot of police and a lot of fire, they lose their identity. They're no longer Fireman Mike or Fireman Sean or Fireman Joe.
Yeah.
They're just Joe then.
I retired from state fire marshal, and after I retired, you know, you used to just be able to walk into a hospital emergency room. Just walk in. I remember walking in and like, hold up, I had to get a badge. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was a whole mental, I have to buy gasoline now. I don't get free gas in my car. You know, these little things.
I can't be on Morales Drive then.
It's those changes when you retire. You know, I had like dreams of work for like 3 months after I retired. You know, people walking down the hallway or something. And
You guys did not plan, man. I had the plan.
you retired like...
I think one of the biggest things, if you look at this panel and what we're talking about, we're talking over 30 years, 40 years, almost 50 years of experience where we could sit on the stage and bring up stories and remember stories that happened way back when as if it happened yesterday. I don't think other occupations in this world can do the same at the same panel and bring up different scenarios and incidents where that's how much it stays with you. I don't think people realize that. Things that we see, things that we've done actually stay with you all these years.
Well, the different thing about us is that, you know, people's like very worst, most emotional day, we go to it, and then after we go eat lunch, it's like, yeah, we did that. And it makes like a part of you different. You know? And so that's why the bonds are so tight. Sean told me when I was young, a long time ago, we went to a call where a person was dead in the house for a long time, long enough that you could smell it from outside. Right?
Flies under windows.
And I was new, puppy. I really wanted to go in this house. And he goes, what's wrong with you? Like, because we get trained and then we want to go use that training and do all that kind of stuff. And he said, listen, you don't know the thing that you're going to see that's going to be yucky. Don't, and he had a 5-year-old probably at the time, so he always said words like yucky. He said, don't go get extra stuff. There's plenty, like, at this point, you know, Little Palm Coast, Florida, we've all seen tons of stuff. And you guys were part of running, you know, and after 1985, we started running 500-ish calls a year. And now the crews are running well over 13,000. They're seeing all manner of things that are important and hard and tough. And they're going back and living their life. And so we're working really hard to make sure that we take care of them from a mental health aspect. But that was the thing, is don't look for extra. The emergency's coming your way. Be ready for it.
What does it feel like? You know, you all have a unique experience of being part of the first 50 years. What does that mean to you personally?
I'm just glad I was part of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was fun, it was challenging, I love mental exercise, but it was definitely a good experience in my life. I've used a lot of the stuff I learned in future occupations, okay, from what the fire department was. Joe will tell you, we've argued on the phone about cause and origin, or origin to cause, whatever the hell you call it this one, okay, quite a few times, but it was challenging. Yeah, I can say it was. Take away from it, glad I've known these guys, I'm glad I was part of this family. That building next door, okay, that's the Little Red Schoolhouse.
It is.
Okay, most of us have gone through that thing, and it's where we learned to improvise or learn to think through the damn problems. okay, and get them solved.
One thing that I would say though is like, it's been an honor and a privilege just to be part of the department and over the years. Not so much like for me specifically, but it is something bigger than yourself. And, you know, I can't speak for this guy, but, you know, to just be able to leave something a little bit better than how you found it, and for the next group that comes. Like both of our kids work for the fire department now, and like that's the biggest honor that you could ever have, to pass that stuff on.
Pride for me in that, taken from what they started in the early days, I came in, we just kept building and building and building. Yeah, we couldn't wear our shirts in this town because it said fire department without getting booed at Publix go to get food for our families and stuff. To today, they're held in a very high esteem for what they do. You call, we come, you know, you call, we haul type of thing, and all those other things we've thrown out through all our years. But they're a staple, and the fire department is a staple in this community. And we all talk about the little red schoolhouse across the street, which if it ever comes down, chances are we'll all be there to watch it come down if we know that it's coming down, because a lot of our lives, as Leo said, he's grown up, I grew up across the street, Jerry's it's part of, for us, the community.
Everything's got to have a starting point, a middle point, and then it sunsets. And we're part of the first 50 years. But let's take a look at what's going to happen in the next 50 years. Oof. And the size of this community is going to be immense. But I go back to when Larry was the training officer, then I was the training officer, then Wagner was the training officer, and then we got people trained to handle any situation that they needed to get trained. And those are the people that now that are in charge and responsible. And that training is going all the way down to the newest firefighter. And the next 50 years are going to be impressive because they're going to have such substantial growth in population and density and fire response that, you know, what we did 40 years ago, 50 years ago was 2 calls a month or 2 calls a year. And these folks are just doing it. And there's a lot of pride in seeing you step away from something and it's continuing without missing a beat.
For me, there's a point in my life that I started to realize that sometimes I got to look back to define myself, you know, and the sense of pride and joy of what that time has been, it's who I am, right? Yes, we look at the future, and I look at the future with a bright light, looking at what's coming. You know, I've been, I would like to say, one of those guys that likes to bring technology and some of the stuff for us, and trying to always be forehead, but I started to realize that sometimes it's okay to look back and be proud of who we were or who we are.
I love history. I love history. I love fire service history. I love the history of this place. I have a lot of artifacts from the old firehouse, you know, that we talk about. You walk in, when I walked into that firehouse, it was a bay with 3 engines, you know, 2 engines and a rescue truck, and 1 big room. And that was it. A couple of couches, kitchen, no bedrooms. We had little Alice, the volunteer from the sheriff's department, in where there's a bedroom now. The stairs in the room. There was nothing. It was just a building. And you take a look at all of us that started in there, and as volunteers, we developed in that one-room schoolhouse, like we were saying. And now look at it today, how it's expanded and how everything. But I do like to look back, and I look like the old photographs of us, you know, hanging the boat up on the ceiling and painting cones and zip ties on extrication tools, you know, all these little different things that kept us busy, kept us going, where today it wouldn't even be looked at.
I read something recently, and I sent it over to Kyle with a little note, and there's a church in Rome that's made of bones. It's everybody who's died in the community, if the body decays, they take the bones and they built the walls out of, so there's thousands of bones. And the inscription that goes above the doorway was, "Where you stand, I once stood. Where I am, you will be." And for me, it resonated so much. I wrote Kyle a very long letter about, this is the story of the fire service.
That needs to go up in every station we have.
Every one of us stood where a new kid Chase was just in the door today. First thing I asked him, why you want to be a firefighter? And we all stood in that kid's spot. And that kid is looking at Kyle. Man, one day maybe I'll be the fire chief. And at one point, Kyle is going to be sitting where we are, retired. and the cycle continues. It's amazing.